got like one more ingredient. We need one more ingredient, and then it would be basically the front door opening to a meal that both no one wants and everyone wants at the same time. Have I been coded enough in my language? I'll talk about it. We're jam-packed. We're high atop a sun-splashed downtown Nashville, Tennessee, which I can say because it's the middle of the day. We're doing sort of a business fan special, a getaway day special, because we got to fly to Oregon in a few hours. It is Thursday, October 10th, the year of our Lord 2024, but we've got upset alerts just like we normally would on Thursday, and I have heard the whispers. The streets are talking, and the streets are talking about 2007. Are we going to have a repeat, Josh? We're going to have a repeat of 2007? For some of you, that means everything. For many of you who are younger, that means nothing. But it will mean the same for us all by the end of this show. And I'm going to tell you whether or not we are headed into just complete and utter chaos, because that's what '07 was. There's questions about Alabama's culture. Are we really doing that? A mere 13 days after they beat Georgia? Yeah, we are doing that. Well, some people are doing it. We're just going to participate in it. And Cole Cubelic will join the show. They're watching us in Jacksonville, Alabama. Gamecocks with a big win last night. I'd say 3/4 of the audience probably doesn't know Jacksonville State is in the state of Alabama, so you do now. Honolulu, Hawaii. Bentonville, Arkansas is tuned in. Gary, Indiana is tuned in. And since I talked about the streets are also saying that much as we did the past few weeks, I will be speaking at the University of Oregon tomorrow. Now, as you know, we've had to keep this under wraps the past few weeks because it hasn't been an event that's been open to the public. It's Q&A. It's nothing but students, but it hasn't been open to the public. But I can't confirm that if you show up at Lillis 211 tomorrow at 12:30 Pacific time that you won't be able to get in. I can't confirm that you won't be able to get in. So I'm just floating that out there once and once only. Let's dive into this show tonight. I'm going to get to a bunch of upset alerts because, yes, I am nervous to varying degrees yet again this week. But I first wanted to start by saying hello to all of you watching live. Boom, there I am in the live chat. I want to talk to you guys about 2007. Where were you in 2007? Were you even born in 2007? Were you already in a midlife crisis by 2007? Well, college football was in a state of crisis for sure. And a bunch of upsets this past weekend triggered thoughts of 2007 for many people. In fact, by the time the sun set and then we had the Miami game going into like 2 a.m. tied up or just barely with the lead on Cal, everyone was saying, oh, this feels like 2007 all over again. And then Bill Connolly the next day, I think we have a tweet that he put out because he heard the whispers and then he started to compare it. He said, top 10 teams losing to unranked opponents. First 6 weeks in '07, 9 of them. This year, 8 top 10 teams have already lost to unranked opponents. So are we feeling 2007? Well, we're halfway there. We're halfway there because that's part one. We do have to have that ingredient. We got to have a bunch of upsets. However, there is a second part, and we don't have it yet. And the second part I'm going to talk to you about in a second. But let me remind you, because some of you were in college, which means you were either barely alive, some of you were still in the production phase of living. I think I've been graphic enough, when 2007 happened. But some of us were around, and whoo, it was wild. So here's what happened in '07. Because people talk about '07 in college football like people in the storm chasing community talk about 2011. So in '07, a ranked team lost to a lower or an unranked team 62 times, not 6.2, 62 times. Ranked lost to lower ranked or not ranked. The top 10 had 29 losses. Number 1 lost 4 times. Number 2 lost 7 times in the final 9 weeks. The final 9 weeks, guys, let me spoil it for you, was utter insanity, the likes of which we haven't seen since then. Number 1 and 2 lost on the same day 3 times, and that includes week 13 and week 14, once you thought you had everything figured out. LSU lost 2 games in the regular season. They won the national title. I want you to think about this. Think about Black Friday weekend. So Thanksgiving happens, and then Arkansas goes to LSU. LSU's already got a loss. Arkansas goes into triple overtime in Baton Rouge, wins the game. LSU loses their final regular season game. They go on to win a national title. What else happened? Multiple top 10s lost in 9 of 14 weeks. So it was far more common than not, any given week, to have not one but more than one top 10 teams falling. This is the AP poll, if you're listening on podcast, entering conference title weekend. This was the AP poll. Missouri was number 1. West Virginia was number 2. All they had to do was win. All they had to do was win, and we were going to get Missouri versus West Virginia for the national championship. And Kansas was number 7. You had Hawaii there. You had Boston College there. It was the stuff of dreams and nightmares, like a Stephen King novel. So why is this weekend very important? This upcoming weekend. Now, we just had a bunch of upsets last weekend. Here's why this upcoming weekend is very pivotal. For any of you '07 dreamers out there, you got to have the second ingredient. You got the first ingredient. We already got a bunch of upsets happening. Just like '07. '07 started with App State over Michigan. That's how that season started. And then it just never stopped giving us that. This right here was a great precursor. So maybe, the Vandy over Alabama, although a little bit later in the season, whomst amongst us knows, maybe that becomes the indicator that we look back on and say, we should have known. Well, that's part 1. Part 2 of the ingredients manual is you can't have an elite team. And right now, Texas still looks elite. Ohio State still looks elite. And that brings me to this weekend. We got Red River Shootout. We got Ohio State at Oregon. So we got pressure spots for both of these teams. And I'm telling you, as I told you Tuesday night, there's about a 6-hour window coming out of Saturday evening/night where if Texas goes down, if Ohio State goes down, if either one of them go down, but especially if both of them go down, then we have hurled ourselves into the great unknown. Because at that point, everybody's looked vulnerable. Even if Oregon beats Ohio State, they've looked vulnerable multiple times. So Ohio State falls, Texas falls, and maybe if Texas doesn't this week, they do next week against Georgia. Like, we are very, very close to having all the ingredients in place for '07. '07, you didn't know, like, all the normalcy, all the normal things you could come to rely on. The bumpers, so to speak, on the bowling lanes, the bumpers were removed. Anything could go in the gutter. Just like any kind of preconceived notion you had, it could go in the gutter. A 2-loss team won the national championship. That's the entire point. So now we've got this expanded playoff apparatus that's on the back of this particular college football season. So that could be the most valuable thing that could be dropped in the lap of an expansionist, of which I am not. But the expansionist crowd, if they got in the first iteration of the expanded playoff, all these upsets, they would have that "I told you so" in their back pocket forever. And that would bring me no joy, but it would be fun to watch. I mean, '07 in college football is, to a fan, what 2011 is to a storm chaser. In 2011, it was the most historic tornado outbreak this side of 1974. Just to give you an idea, we had 4 EF5 tornadoes on one day in that year, and had Joplin and El Reno that same year. We've had 1, I think, since then. We had 11 EF4s that day. That was the Tuscaloosa tornado, Philadelphia, Mississippi, like Hackleburg and Phil Campbell, Alabama. All these are legendary tornadoes in the South. So it takes a lot. Anytime we go storm chasing, you can tell the noobs in the crowd, because they'll sit there at the gas station, probably a Quick Trip in the morning, and they'll say, "Hey, you guys think this could be like April 27, 2011? You're fired." Well, I'm not going to fire you if you're asking if this year could be 2007 all over again in college football, but we need all the ingredients in place. So now we'll start to ask whether we're going to get them. First thing I'm going to ask you is, where are you going to get your tailgating supplies? Academy Sports and Outdoors. Where are you going to get your hunting and fishing gear? Academy Sports and Outdoors. Where are you going to get your Big League Chew? Academy Sports and Outdoors. They are the exclusive provider of this show. They bring this show to you, but they also bring you a lot of stuff you need. If you can't get there in person, that's okay, because academy.com is right there for you. They have been our longtime partner, and I strongly encourage you guys, because I know you have a lot of different needs in your life. Maybe you need to clean stuff up after storms have come through. I know a lot of our folks down in Florida are dealing with this right now in due time. Hopefully things are restored and repaired back to their original state down there. But I had someone who lived in another storm-prone area last week sent me an email like a mile long listing all the supplies they had gotten from Academy for cleanup and for disaster relief. And so I just said, I've never even mentioned that, but I should mention that. So they got it there too, Academy Sports and Outdoors. They've got you hooked up no matter really what you need. And we appreciate them because they hook us up and make the show free. Upset alerts. Could we have it again? Here's your end, Colin. Could we have another upset-laden week? This time last week, we were shaken with good reason because we had a huge upset week on the horizon. So this week, I got some games I want to look at here. The way we do it on this show is I give you an upset concern scale, 1 to 10. I give you a number on it. So South Carolina plays Alabama. And for the most casual-minded amongst us, You remember Bama was favored by about 23 or 24 against Vandy. They're only favored by 21.5 here. Will it happen? Well, my concern level is 5.5 here. I don't think it'll happen, but hey, what is that worth? I didn't think Vandy would happen either. Diego Pavia last week tore Alabama up. Can Lenora Sellers do that? I think a very simple way to look at this is, well, what Pavia did, Lenora Sellers can do. I don't think he can. I don't know that he's ready to do that quite like Pavia did. And there are different dynamics here as well. Total Super Bowl moment for Vanderbilt last week, and good for him, by the way. South Carolina last week kind of got undressed early against Ole Miss, and now this is the next conference game for them. It's at home for Alabama. Like, there's so much different. And also, you got Bama's full attention, whereas I don't know what in the world kind of state of mind they were in last week. So I think South Carolina needs 30 minimum to win here. And they got 31, I think, against Kentucky when they went to Lexington and beat them, but it was a lot of non-offensive stuff. So if you can get that, then it's in play. The upset's in play. I just don't know that I can count on that. This is only a 5.5. It's a 5.5 because last week made me think that anything's possible. Otherwise, it'd be lower than that. What about the Red River Shootout, known by no other name on this program? Texas is favored by 14.5 against Oklahoma. I'm going to put a 7 on it. But I think Texas wins and covers. But I respect what this rivalry is, and I respect what college football can throw at us. Michael Hawkins, quarterback there for Oklahoma, kind of needs the game of his life. You know, that's all you ask. Game of your life. The Oklahoma defense, I think, needs to manufacture 10 points here. If they can manufacture 10, now that doesn't mean they have to score 10 because it's hard for a defense to score 3 points. But you get what I mean, setting up short fields off turnovers and stuff like that. Or pin someone deep, make them punt, special teams generates positive field position. Those are defensive generated points and scoring opportunities. If they can score 10 and offensively they can find me 14, 24 points is not too much to ask. Now, anything above and beyond, that's great. But if I'm Oklahoma and I've got my defense, I think I can cook up a plan in 2 weeks with Brent Venables leading the way where I think I've got a shot if I score 24. If I can't get to 24, it's unreasonable, not impossible, but unreasonable to think I have a shot. They've got to limit explosive plays on offense. They've got to generate explosive plays in the aggregate on defense, whatever that means to you. It's a 7. It's a 7 because crazy stuff happens in these sorts of games. I don't expect it to happen, but I've been wrong before, so I'm going to make it a 7. Next up, a game I know good and well none of you are paying attention to. That's why I'm going to talk about it. In fact, I want to ask you, if you're listening on podcast and you can't see the bottom of the screen, Pitt is undefeated. Cal just lost gut-wrenching fashion against Miami. They have to travel cross-country to Pitt. They've already gone cross-country to Auburn. They went cross-country to Florida State. It's their third cross-country trip. What do you think the line on this game would be? 7, 9, 10? Pitt's favored by 3.5. And the model hates Pitt because the model still leans Cal, but the model's hated Pitt all year long, and we've lost money betting against Pitt. So I'm not going that far, but I'm going to put an 8 on my concern level for this game. Eli Holstein, quarterback for Pitt. He's averaged 300-plus passing. He's run for 50 or more the last 3 games. His toughest opponent has been West Virginia, and they played him at home. Cal is infinitely more battle-tested here, and they're road warriors, so there's a couple of different ways you can look at this travel thing. If you just believe that the cumulative effect of miles traveled is going to be detrimental to a team, then Cal's going to get boat raced in your mind. But there is another scenario where, all right, this is their third trip crossing 3 time zones. Maybe they're just kind of used to it now. Auburn is barely in the central time zone, but they're right up against Columbus. They're almost in the eastern time zone. So for broad strokes purposes, let's just pretend Cal's gone cross-country thrice. I don't know how to quantify that because we haven't seen it happen yet. But I've got a little concern here. I've got a little concern. In fact, I got a lot of concern. I'm going to make it an 8 for Pitt. What about Florida at Tennessee? Maybe out of all these double-digit spread games, this is easily the most interesting and intriguing to me this weekend. This is a 7 on the upset alert concern meter for me. I think Florida's got a legit shot here. And Tennessee's favored by 15.5. Graham Mertz versus the Tennessee secondary. That's the matchup. Because the key to limiting Tennessee is, can you limit explosive plays like we see Thornton here scoring against Oklahoma? Can you limit that? Or can you make them have to hit more than 1 or 2 of them? And you do that by limiting them on the ground. And hardly anyone's been able to do that so far this year. And maybe Florida can't do it either, but I have just a little spark of hope in the back of my mind because they held UCF to 2.7 yards per carry last week. And that's really good because that's UCF's bread and butter, and that's not a bad team at UCF. At least I don't think they are. So we see every year teams get left for dead, and you think that they're dead over there in the ditch, and then you're looking in your rearview mirror, and it's like, I saw some movement back there. Is the movement Florida? We shall see. This is a chance to totally resurrect everything about the energy of the team down there. I'm going to put a 7 on it. This bears close watching. And Iowa State, we at Iowa State are at West Virginia. We are undefeated, and we are a 2.5-point favorite. I hope they don't lose. I've got a 9 on the upset alert concern meter. It's a tough spot. Should be a tough spot. Listen to me. I'm a little terrified. I have confidence, but I'm terrified. West Virginia ran for like half a mile to 3/4 of a mile last week. They ran for 389 yards against Oklahoma State. So that happened. Iowa State is 15th in the JP poll right now, and that's great. West Virginia's 28th. Like West Virginia's, that's them. They're knocking on the door of top 25 status. Their losses at West Virginia are to Penn State and Pitt. They got no conference losses. They're every bit as in this thing. They're tied for first in the Big 12 with Iowa State. So I have concerns. I've got a 9 on the upset alert concern meter. I can't see a way that this doesn't get decided in the fourth quarter. Hope I'm wrong. Think I'm right. There you go. Those are the upset alert concern meters for week 7. They're watching us in Long Beach, New York. Yazoo City, Mississippi is tuned in. If you ever have doubts about storm chasing in Mississippi, just go to Yazoo City and wait. That is tested methodology, and it's been tested over and over and over again. Lawrence, Kansas, they're tuned in as well. Quick Trip fueling us, man. We're headed to Eugene. In fact, we're flying out of here in about 2 hours. We're headed up to Oregon for Ohio State versus Oregon and the entire Whole New Saturday tour powered by Quick Trip. Couple of things. I just got you guys some free stuff. So if you look in the YouTube description, there's a doc in there. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. A lot of you have been asking for some free stuff. So if you've downloaded the app, you can do it on the QR code here on the screen. I would advise you, if you want an added chance at free stuff that's exclusive to our audience, drop your email in that doc. You don't have to do it. I know some of you are weird about giving your email address. It's just for Quick Trip. I promise you, no one else sees this. But if you don't want to, don't do it. If you do want some more free stuff, that's kind of guaranteed. Like this is guaranteed because at random, we're just giving free stuff out there. Above and beyond the free gas cards at random, then you can drop it there. Yeah, I think that's all I needed to hit, Jesse. I think that's all I needed to hit. So we appreciate Quick Trip because they are fueling us all over the country in this fine college football season in 2024. Have to check the year. Cole Cubelic in just a few moments. But in the meantime, I got to get you some best bets. And I've also got to talk about just complete crushing disappointment. We don't like being negative. We do not. But sometimes we have to be. Jesse, remind me about this Post-it on my finger if I forget, because I probably will forget. I got some disappointing teams that unfortunately we have to call out. I get accused of being positive all the time, so let's just drop a heavy, heaping helping of negativity on everyone's head. Auburn, what has happened to you? You are 2-4, and yet I'm looking at our power ratings over here, and the model still has Auburn as a top 40 team. Why is that? Well, because it understands that it's been a turnover problem. And elsewhere, Auburn is not a bad team. If you could ever tell me the week that's going to arrive where they don't really turn the ball over, they'd be okay. But they've turned it over all year. They had 4 interceptions against Cal and lost. They had 4 picks against Arkansas and lost. They were playing clean against Oklahoma and winning. Then they threw a pick 6 and lost. They've given it away 15 times this year. That's good for 132nd in the country. We didn't even have 132 FBS teams until recently. So I'm disappointed. But I'm not giving up. This team can upset some people in the back stretch. All they have to do is possess the football. It's so easy and so complicated. I'm upset with USC a little bit, but this is a different one. Because USC, they're being viewed through a post-LSU lens. So people had some doubt about them. Then they beat LSU, and then it was perceived that they were just off to the races, kicked the snowball down the hill, yada, yada, yada. And so I'm kind of conflicted because they haven't been bad. They lost at Michigan very close, questionable decision-making. I'm speaking for the USC fan base now. And they lost to Minnesota, again, questionable decision-making. Again, I'm speaking for the USC fan base. So they haven't been terrible. I think there's a lot to be proud of. So on one hand, I'm a little pleasantly surprised still in USC. But if you start the season after LSU, if you reset expectations, recalibrate them post-LSU, it's mildly disappointing, especially that they lost that Minnesota game. That they couldn't score more than 17 at Minnesota, that's disappointing. FSU, I don't know what more needs to be said here. This is the poster child program for the highs and lows that any major program can experience in the new era of college football if you lean disproportionately on the portal. I mean, to think about how excited we were about the O-line, D-line here, and their 133rd rushing offense, their 109th rush defense, their 126th in third down conversions, they're 128th in points per game. They're 103rd in sacks allowed. Just a complete no-show of a team this year. And that's about as disappointing as it gets. Kansas, very disappointing. Kansas has lost 5 straight games. They beat Lindenwood, whomst amongst us hasn't, and then they fell off a cliff. And Jalen Daniels has not been good. Another classic case of just because a guy returns doesn't mean he improves. They're 104th in passing offense right now. Daniels, 8 picks, 7 passing touchdowns, 54% completion. Like these aren't numbers that you thought you'd attach to him. He lost his coordinator to Penn State. Even I didn't expect it to fall off this much. And they haven't really done anything with him on the ground either. He's like a 3.4 yards per carry guy. You know what this feels like? It feels like what happened with Iowa State a little bit in that the entire staff there and Leipold leading the program, you start to think, oh, look, he's building, and they keep up trajectory. It's Kansas. It's not Georgia. So you cannot sustain there, just like Iowa State could not sustain at that 7 or 8 win level because history says you have no business doing that. History says at Kansas, you have no business doing that. So they've fallen off a little bit. They went from 2 wins to 6 wins to 9 wins, and now they're 1-5. So 3-year progression, fall off. It's not the craziest thing in the world, but it is disappointing to see. Oklahoma State, dead on arrival. We got the Doak Walker winner last year. Best tailback in the country, most experienced offensive line in the country returning. They are 122nd in rush yards per game right now. And they allowed 389 on the ground to West Virginia last week. West Virginia ran for 162 more than Oklahoma State had running and passing. Just total no-show of a team. Lost 38-14 last week. They got boat raced by Kansas State. They got beat by Utah's backup quarterback. They should have lost to Arkansas, but we don't believe in that word because if you should have lost, you would have lost, as Meemaw always said. But Oklahoma State's been a huge disappointment. And then NC State, again, kind of dead on arrival. We did expect a slight defensive downturn with them. Points per game, just listen to this. You tell me where it went wrong. Points per game, 2021, 14th allowed. Points per game allowed. 2021, 14th. 2022, 11th. All right, knocking on the door of the top 10. 2023, 25th. Still not terrible. 2024, 120th. Did you hear what happened there? Was there one of those that didn't sound like the other? They've played Tennessee and Clemson already this year. Combined loss, 110-45. I have disappointment, and you people are going to hear about it. That's a shame. All of our odds around here powered exclusively by FanDuel, and the reason I told Jesse to remind me of a post-it is because right before we went on air, in fact, I'm going to pull the text up here, we have an open line of communication with FanDuel, and they are the exclusive odds provider of the show. Okay, we got new games of the year. Like I'm about to give you guys this right off my screen. So first, here's what you need to know. This weekend, huge weekend. I know a lot of you kind of are on the precipice of signing up. Do I sign up or don't I? Well, just a little hint. If you're going to sign up, do it in the week where new signups can bet $5 to win $300. Like it's not even against the spread. Just pick a money line favorite. Bet 5 on it, and you're going to win $300. So we call that free money, no strings attached there. And you do have profit boosts this weekend, like Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, USC, Texas, Oklahoma, Florida, Tennessee. You got profit boost on those. So just look, you'll see the token right there on the screen. Take advantage of that. That is free money. Take advantage of that. But here's what I wanted to talk to you about. And I'm going to give you the Ramen Noodle Express in a second, and we'll bring Cubelic in. So I'm talking with FanDuel a little while ago, and David hit me and said, hey, we got games of the year alert. So let me tell you what I advise you to do. A lot of you think you have some reads on these big games. So, for example, if you think that Penn State's going to go beat USC and maybe Oregon's going to beat Ohio State, if you think that, you need to know something. Right now, you can go to FanDuel and bet a future. You can bet a game of the year line. Ohio State is -4 against Penn State. That game's like 3 weeks down the road. But if you think you've got an angle on that game, it's there right now to be bet. Texas against Texas A&M, last week of the regular season, everyone's talking about it already. Everyone's talking about how A&M could be a playoff contender. I need you to understand, you could go get A&M right now, plus 11.5 against Texas. So if you think you got a shot to beat them, FanDuel's giving you 11.5 points of cushion there. And also, here's another scenario. Let's say Georgia gets the ship righted. Let's say Ole Miss falls this weekend to LSU and things kind of, you think maybe be trending towards going off the rails a little bit. Maybe Ole Miss isn't as good as we thought they were. Well, Georgia plays in Oxford later in the year. Georgia -3.5. You could also get the underdogs at a really good value proposition there. So there are games of the year, a lot of them. I just listed 3. There are like over a dozen new games listed at FanDuel right now. Games of the year. If you think you know, prove it. Go take advantage of it. Ramen Noodle Express, really quick. I'm on LSU plus 3.5. I'm on Ohio -2.5. We got these in earlier in the week. I'm on Iowa -2.5. I am proudly adding our second MAC game. I'm on Miami of Ohio -2.5. Now, we've liked Eastern Michigan, but we like Miami of Ohio at Eastern Michigan this weekend. We like Cole Cubelic. We bet on him to come on the show at 2:20, and it is 2:21, and we're going to count it because we give ourselves 1 or 2 minutes grace period, and I'm told that you've been waiting for quite a while anyway. So fire off your tweet there. Make sure everyone knows that you're on the show, and then once you do, welcome. Happy Thursday.
Just trying to help you promote your show.
I appreciate it.
And get things going for you and help things up. I didn't get a single one of my questions that I had about certain lines on Friday night lines. So that was disappointing. I'm glad you got all yours out today. I'm sending mine in again Friday night, though.
I appreciate the support. Did you have any recollection or did you have any knowledge that you were sitting at a hotel in Nashville spamming my live chat on Friday night and you were a mere 12 hours from watching the biggest upset maybe of the year go down, and you had a front row seat for it? Tell the people what that was like.
We had an idea this thing could be competitive and be close. We go through that in our production meeting every week when we sit down and talk and, how do we think this game's going to go? What are we looking for? And I said, well, here are some of the avenues where Vanderbilt can be competitive. And I did get laughed at by multiple people on our crew, not Tom Hart, but other folks thought that was funny. And I just said, listen, this kid's been running this offense for 3 years. I called one of their games last year. Obviously, I study all the Auburn film. I saw what they did to that team. I know the offense. And they got some other veterans in places that are going to be able to help. And this is just here's the thing that I thought was really unique. We thought this was going to be a big benefit for Alabama. First 3 weeks of the season, what offenses did they face? Josh Heupel's air raid. You kind of got that Wisconsin offense that used to be at North Carolina and Ole Miss. That's kind of spread you out up tempo a little bit. Even though quarterback went out, it wasn't the same. So you got Helton's offense at Western Kentucky. They had not seen anything really near this, and I feel like that was also a pretty big advantage for Vanderbilt. How much of that I really believed would take place and would happen? Some, not a lot. I think a lot of it in my mind was dependent on Alabama's mindset. How ready were they going to be able to play? How quickly would they recognize things? And I think that was the biggest issue. You can talk about scheme and you can talk about matchups and different things like that. What I saw was an Alabama defense that was hesitant and that was thinking and not reacting quickly. And when you do that defensively, Josh, you're in trouble no matter what. So we thought there were some things that could make it interesting, but actually pulling that thing off the way they did, because you heard me say it, and I think I heard you say it, that game was not given. That was not a gift. That was not a fluke. That was not one that we're going to look back and say, boy, if they'd have just taken those 3 things away, it would have been totally different. Vanderbilt won that football game.
Yeah, so that brings me to my next point. Colin, here's your end point for the cut later. I have listened to every version of criticism towards Alabama that I could possibly get. I've listened to people criticize the defense. I've listened to folks criticize wardrobe choices for the head coach. I've listened to people outright question the culture of Alabama and the integrity of players, all this stuff. So I look at that, of course, and I believe in the age-old adage Meemaw taught me, let your emotion move at the speed of honey, not at the speed of water. So I don't think of the program any differently than I did last week when they had beaten Georgia. Culture is a very big thing, and culture does not change. It doesn't not morph over the span of 6 or 7 days. But I did want to kind of get your take on this because I know you've sat down there in Birmingham all week and taken calls on this, and you've been flooded with it as well. Plus, you had the game last week, and then I think you got Vandy this weekend too. So you're right in the heart of that, and you got a different vantage point on it even than I do. I look at it, and if you were to put me in like a cryo chamber in January after he gets hired, and the last thing I heard was, ooh, a bunch of guys are about to hit the portal. Ooh, this guy's never recruited the South. Bam. That's it. You don't get to experience anything else until now. And you pop me out of that cryo chamber, and they're a one-loss team, and they've gone to Wisconsin and did what they did. Their recruiting's on fire. They then beat Georgia, and then they had this thing just happen to Vandy. I'm probably looking at it in the moment, and I'm saying, ooh, they lost to Vandy? Oh, they beat Georgia, though. Well, that's a really good win at Wisconsin. And recruiting's what? Wow. Things seem to be going pretty well. You care what he's wearing? Well, that sounds crazy. I'm going to mute you. You're not a serious person. But I would listen to the rest of the stuff, and I would say, yeah, I get people are upset about the Vandy loss, but, dude, it's not the craziest thing in the world to think about that defensive transition and think about how young they are and maybe how they lack some top-end competitive depth on that side of the ball and think, yeah, that someone could get them. That someone else may get them. I would look in general, and I would say, are we questioning culture here, though? Part B, do we have the slightest idea of what we're even saying when we're questioning the culture there? So you can go whichever direction you want to, and I know you already have this week, but I think a lot of it's laughable.
I'm glad you brought this up and not the laughable stuff, because you brought up a word in today's college football that I think is very intriguing, and that is culture. I asked McElroy the other day, I would ask you the same question. I thought he would know. He didn't throw out the name that I thought he would. But, who is the culture king? Who is the coach that says that word every time you talk to him? Hey, we got to get our culture right. We got to do this for our culture. In the Southeastern Conference, who would you throw out as to being that guy?
I mean,
that says culture.
Elko says it a lot. Heupel says it a lot. Kirby says it a lot. Who are you going for
Keep
here?
Going.
Sark. It's Sark. It's Sark. That's who it is.
Sark likes his culture, but no, that's not it. For me, Billy Napier is the guy that says culture like every other word. Okay. And I covered him at Louisiana a couple of times too, so maybe that was it. How's that going for him? And nothing against Billy, because I do think culture is a big reason that they won in Lafayette. And they had some better players, but now playing field neutralized just a little more from a talent perspective. This is why that's cool, is Clark Lee was very upfront and very honest with us when he met with us on Friday. And I had a couple ideas of how they had managed some things in the offseason, but didn't have a lot of clarity to it. So I asked him, I said, what was your biggest change in approach this offseason? And he kind of started to give us a little bit of coach speak. And if you haven't been around Clark, you need to understand how philosophical he is and how thoughtful he is. But he's someone that you would sit down with and he would give you paragraphs of phrases of what he wanted guys to remember and how they were building humans and how they were trying to build better people, and better people helped you become better players and all that kind of stuff. I mean, quotes from this and this tribe and this leader and this president and this general. Just as long as you could sit there and listen to him, he would do it. And he finally just stopped and he said, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I sat in my office one day in December and I said, F it, I want to win. And he said, so I had to back off. And I had to sort of pull the reins on myself a little bit and realize that maybe some of the things that I was doing weren't necessarily the best things to help us win. And he changed all that. He hit the reset button on his personal approach to his team. It's not that some of those things aren't still there and they don't utilize some of those things, but a lot of what he took away, Josh, were culture pieces of that. Because let's be real, what's the biggest probably culture booster? Winning, right? Mm-hmm. If you win, your culture is going to be pretty damn good, no matter what. But to hear one of the most thoughtful coaches that I'm around on an annual basis basically say, I had to take some of that stuff and just throw it out. He said they used to meet every morning. And he said, kids don't want to do that. So we don't do that anymore. He said, Are there some guys that act like a jerk every now and then, but they're still going to play on Saturday? Yeah. And it might not used to go that way. He said, now they're not legally in trouble or they're not fighting kids in class or whatever, but I just had to change my approach. So just that word in general right now is so different at so many places. I don't even know how we judge. Like you said, how do we judge a culture of a program right now? Is it guys going to class? Half the guys don't even go to class anymore. It's all online.
Yeah.
So what are you even saying when you say that they're really good in their living room in front of a laptop? I don't know. Was it showing up to work out? Is it making sure other guys don't get in trouble, holding guys accountable? I guess what I'm saying is to question someone's culture, you have to know what it is.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if we know what that is across the board in college football right now.
I mean, I don't want you to get specific. We can keep this very generic, but you know, just like I do, because we've both sat down with them, we've both walked through the hallways, you got some places out there where there are some like grade A turds in the building that are starting on Saturday, and they're winning games, and you'll listen to callers on radio, you'll read the message boards, and you'll hear folks talk about how rock solid the culture is there. And it becomes pretty apparent, folks don't have the slightest clue what culture is. Culture is code for winning. And no one praises the culture of a losing program, and everyone questions the culture or praises the culture of a winning program, and they never open the hood on either, in fairness, because they don't have the ability to do it. And I think the one thing, though, I'll get your take on this, and then we'll move on. The one thing that I was pretty taken aback by was the Malachi Moore stuff, which was crazy because, like, a lot of the country doesn't know Malachi Moore. They know he started for a long time at Bama, and then they see him kick the football. They see him throw the mouthpiece. They see him refuse to come off the field, all of which is pretty pathetic. But then if you know that dude, you know him, I know him, you know that there's probably not a kid that staff would rather trot out to represent their program than Malachi Moore. So you look at it and like you saw a guy in his absolute worst moment act ridiculously, and you can look at that and say, that's a culture problem. I can look at it and say, I think it looks bad, really bad. I don't think that's what it is. And if I see 15 more examples of it, I'll change my attitude towards it. But I haven't. I've seen one of them. So, like, how did you interpret that?
You're talking about a young man who has his handprints right outside Denny Chimes. He's been the two-time captain, somebody who uses his NIL money to pay for his brother to go to college, who's a walk-on on the football team. So does that mean that I'm going to completely excuse the petulance that he showed on the field? Absolutely not. But I would also remind myself that in my 40s, I have had moments of petulance. Like the camera that I'm doing this interview on right now, the fact that it took me months to get it hooked up and the different cords that I tried to get it hooked up to. I had one night where I melted down and my wife literally asked me to leave the house. She said, you have to go away because the way you're acting right now is not normal. And I don't need you here waking our children up because you're losing your mind that this thing's not working.
But Bama,
we're all going to have moments. We're all going to have moments that we fall off track like that. That's going to happen. Like you said, when I see it 10, 20 more times, then we can look at it as a bit of a problem. I would be much more concerned about guys who had opportunities to physically play a more physical brand of football and chose not to, specifically on that side of the ball in that game. I don't care if a guy gets beat on an out route. If a guy gets picked, okay, don't do it twice, learn from your mistakes. But when somebody is being drugged, a defender's hanging on to a tight end who needs 3 more yards for a first down, and 2 other defenders come up and don't take that shot on him and decide to just kind of coast up and look and see what happens, and he's able to drag them an extra few yards for a first down, those are the things I'd be more concerned about than a guy got mad and a guy threw his mouthpiece. Now, the walking up there and kicking the football is beyond anything I can even imagine. I'm not sure what we're trying to accomplish there, but that's in the past. And you let him move forward. You try to help him learn from his mistakes. I would be more concerned about some effort pieces that I saw than I would about how guys lost their temper or acted like a child.
Yeah. All right. One more thing for you here, and then we got to run. You know Texas A&M pretty well. You know Mike Elko. You know Texas A&M. I was out there last week, and we were there for the Missouri game, obviously, so I saw them at their very best so far under Mike Elko. But we were there Friday, and it's just so wild to get explained to you how much had to be undone there. I'm not talking about roster. They didn't have to go overhaul it like Dion did at Colorado. Not like that, but just when you have a guy who's been pretty tenured at a place like Jimbo was, You don't have to throw them under the bus or anything, but to explain how you transition from one guy to the other guy, especially when the previous guy wasn't cutting it. You talk about this web, and it's like you have to undo it, or a rubber band ball, and you have to undo it one rubber band at a time. And some of it's personnel, some of it's staff, some of it's culture, some of it's politics, and it can almost make you hesitant to take the job. Of course, it's A&M because you take the job. So things started the way they did there. Now you got Wigman back, and they have by far their most dominant performance of the year. Of course, irresponsibly, then that means a lot of folks start asking, could we be a one-loss team when we play Texas? Like, not learning from all the chaos around you, but that's okay. It's your constitutional right to look ahead. Teams don't need to, fans can. But in the grand scheme of things right now, I don't think the sky is the limit for that team. I still think that there's an imposed ceiling roster-wise, but it's a lot higher than number 15 in the country or whatever they are right now. So I think that team could find itself in the top 10. I think that team could do some special things this year. Long term, I just more and more by the day continue to be convinced, wow, they got the right guy, and wow, he's not going to be a superstar for quite a while. Like, he's not a sexy hire, but probably the right hire, and then it just gets reinforced the more you're around it. So give me your 50,000 and then zoom in a little bit view on Texas A&M.
All right, so let's take some of these things that go along with what we just discussed, culture, and then other phrases or words that we hear that we don't ever really know if that means anything. And I'll tell you when it actually does mean something. So culture, buy-in, attitude, fit, all those things, right? And we never, like, there was no better fit for LSU to be the head coach than Ed Orgeron. I mean, the guy literally had to beg his father for money to get tickets, and they couldn't afford him to go to games when he was a kid there at Tiger Stadium. So that didn't work out. Here's when it does work out. Buy-in and fit work out when you can get your guys to do things full speed and they understand what they're doing. This is a little bit of what the issue was with Alabama. We can point to all the stuff around scheme, but when you're not playing fast and the effort cannot be what it needs to be to play at a high level, that's a problem with either the culture, the buy-in, or the fit, or maybe all of those. What Coach Elko has done is found guys that can be a good fit for what he wants to do, but not what he has to do. So he's going to do things that are a good fit for his players first. Then he's going to make sure they understand why they're doing it. Okay, so there comes the buy-in portion of that. When your guys know where to go, what to do, how to do it, how to get lined up, they're not looking left and right when they're trying to find out what the check was or when the tight end moves, what's the personnel grouping. It's just boom, boom, boom. You get lined up and then you go and you play full speed. That's what buy-in is to me. And then culture on top of that, I look at that as more the icing. So that's when guys come in and watch extra film on their own. That's when guys hold their teammates accountable. That's when you've watched so much or talked about so much that you understand it before your coaches even get to it. That's what I see a lot with Texas A&M right now. And to go a little bit of a step further, being very specific in your game plans. I thought the coolest part about Saturday, when you looked at those three upsets, well, and A&M was favored, but let's just say it was an upset happening that way. None of us really saw that coming. So for that one to go that way, for Arkansas to beat Tennessee and Vanderbilt to beat Alabama, none of those super fluky, by the way.
Yeah.
The reasons that they happened were the plans that were put in place. The stretch play was shut down on the second or third play of the game when Nick Scorton destroyed a tackle about 4 yards deep into the backfield. And all of a sudden, you aren't going to have the play that you need to build your offense around for the rest of the day. And then the amount of free runners that came on pressures was almost uncountable because it kept happening over and over and over again. Now, is Connor Wigman going to be that accurate every day? I don't know. Is Travis Williams going to run a 3-2-6 defense every week? No, he's not. But they put it in that week, and that specific plan worked. Same thing with Vanderbilt, knowing they needed to own time of possession and keep the best players that were involved in that game on the sideline. Jalen Milroe, Ryan Williams, Tyler Booker, amongst others. So when you have buy-in along with your culture, and you can get your guys to go a little bit further with the understanding of how they're doing it and why they're doing it, which is the most important part, then you play full speed and you use all that athletic ability that you have to be able to go out there and dominate. And that's what I saw from those teams, and it's what I'm seeing early on from Texas A&M.
A couple of other things I think are crazy here. I was in their weight room talking to Tommy Moffitt, who, for those of you who don't know, is at Texas A&M now. Guy says, this is actually the most fun I've ever had doing this. And it's the most fun because we got a guy in Mike Elko that has 100% wind in our sails to run a strength and conditioning program the way it's supposed to be run. And if you know anything about A&M, in the latter stages of the Jimbo era, you know that maybe the previous S&C staff wasn't really free to feel like they could do that, because anything that you ran up the ladder really wasn't going to get the full stamp of approval for the head man. And as a result, something that exists at the lower high school level kind of started to exist at the high level college level, and that is strength and conditioning, just kind of voluntary. Like, yeah, everybody goes, but some of them are checked out after 30 minutes, and it's not really mandatory. That's not the case there anymore. And the other thing, and we got to go in a second, but the other thing, you have fun with this, if you will, and I'll talk to you about this when I get back from Oregon. I think the misconception, perhaps, is that Jimbo and A&M recruited at an extremely high level. I think numbers-wise and rankings-wise, that may be true. But if you go look at the NFL draft, and you go look at how poor they've performed there, even relative to the middle of the pack in the SEC, you start to learn a little something. The more you talk to scouting types and the more you talk to folks who know that program, the more you realize the misconception was they recruited a whole lot of high-level guys and then Jimbo didn't coach them up. Coaches will tell you Jimbo's actually a really, really good coach. It's that the guys they went and got, in many cases, they weren't beating Georgia for. They weren't beating Alabama for. So if you're landing 4- and 5-star guys, but you're not fighting the top schools for them, it may tell you a little something about those 4- and 5-star guys. That 2022 class, which was the highest rated of all time, is totally disintegrated. And a lot of them were character pieces, and a lot of them were just mis-evals, and not just on their end, but maybe on the recruiting industry's end in some cases. And in some cases in the recruiting industry, there are things about a guy from the neck up that you couldn't possibly know that makes your eval incomplete. And so now, not only is the evaluation piece and the developmental piece elite because they did it at Duke. They did it before he got there. So he brings those pieces and those aspects with him. But I also think they understand there's a little different way that you recruit A&M. I would almost say that is as much like an Ohio State as it is an LSU or an Ole Miss or an Alabama in the way they attract kids to campus and how they sell A&M. And you got a guy who understands it. So I know that it was nice to beat Missouri, but even if they had lost a dogfight to Missouri, there are so many green arrows that you get when you start to raise the hood on Texas A&M that I'm buying stock in them if anyone wants to sell stock. Your last words, sir, before we're out of here.
I would just tell all the things that you said with recruiting, and then once you get talent in place, I don't know if this is a word, but believability is what comes to my mind. And that goes back to putting guys on the field. Can you allow them to believe that what they're doing is going to work? Because I can promise you, there are a lot of college football players out there, Josh, that are just running plays. And they just think it should work because the coach told them it should work in practice one time against a scout team. But do you believe conceptually why that's going to work? A good example is where you're going this weekend. When you watch Oregon's defense, a lot of what they do is created. It's not just 5 stars everywhere. They have some good players, there's no doubt. But the precision in which they run their pressures and their movement and the understanding of, we're not just running this twist so hopefully one guy gets to make a play and there's no one on him. You have to pick it a certain way. You have to hug the other guy coming backside again just a certain way. And then when you do that, if a play is run correctly, even by the offense, we should still win because you believe that your effort and your technique will go work. I think some guys in recruiting come in and they just believe they're already that guy. That's one thing that's brilliant about Kirby Smart is he's been able to get the guys that coming out of high school were those guys to believe they're not the guys, and they got to go earn it, and they got to go prove it. Because look at the draft picks he's had, and they're still playing in bowl games, and they're still going out there and playing a different level of intense football because he forces them to believe that whatever they've already done is not enough, and whatever they've been told is not enough, and they better go prove it on the field or they're not going to get to where they want to go.
Good stuff. All right, I'm putting a link in the live chat, people. Cube Show. You need to go subscribe. It's not just that guy with a YouTube channel. It has a name. He has a name. He has a heart. Some say he has a soul. And he is really, really, really a menace in a live chat when you're trying to do a Friday Night Line segment, but otherwise a wonderful person. Sir, have fun in Lexington this weekend.
Colorado School of Mines. I want Colorado School of Mines.
Cut him off, Colin. Just cut him off. Please, just do away with him. Be gone. Thank you. All right, we got to head to the airport. We're headed up to Portland and then Eugene, eventually tonight at some time. So I will be on campus at the University of Oregon tomorrow, and I will do Friday Night Lines from Oregon tomorrow night. Make sure you're following the Instagram channel at Late Kick Josh. I'll have a ton of good stuff. We'll be on the sideline there Saturday night, pristine weather conditions, Ohio State at Oregon. Where else would you rather be? Appreciate you guys so much. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and the pod if you haven't already. We'll see you back here Sunday night for full reaction. Until then, take care and God bless.